Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT10, and BT10 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration of the Beelzemon deck. So the Beelzemon deck last got its big update in EX2, and even though it didn't get a whole lot in BT10, it still got a few cards to help flesh out and round out what the deck is capable of. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be your classic self-mill style deck, and it has lots of ways to be able to reward you for self-milling, and it has some nice easy ways to be able to get up into your level 6, to then be able to get up into your level 7, to be able to do some very powerful and devastating things. So with all that said and done, let's just jump right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running one copy of DemiMeramon. So DemiMeramon is going to be the 5th Digitama of the deck. If you really wanted it to, you could have it be the main Digitama of the deck. It doesn't really matter, just because the Digitamas in the deck are just trying to help fill up our trash as best as we possibly can. So what DemiMeramon is doing is it has a nice on-delete ability where we get to draw one card and discard one card from our hand to selectively put what we want into our trash, which sometimes is actually to this deck's benefit, even though the majority of the deck wants to be self-milled. And that's why, as the main Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Pagumon. So this is the starter deck version of Pagumon, and this Pagumon has the on-delete inheritable ability of being able to trash the top 2 cards of our deck, which is essentially fitting more on theme with what the deck is trying to do, and we do want the on-delete abilities more than any other type of ability, just because we're trying to be very aggressive with our low-level Digimon in anticipation that they're eventually going to be deleting, either A, through the opponent deleting our Digimon, or B, through us attacking into the opponent's security and them dying to the security. Or C, us having some self-delete effects if we include them into the deck to be able to delete them ourselves. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Impmon. So this is the BT2 version of Impmon, and this is one of the best cards to try to help turbo mill our trash. So he himself has the on-delete ability where we get to mill the top 3 cards of our deck, so that way we could try to set up our trash as quickly as we possibly can. So this, in combination with Pagumon, means that when this Impmon is going to die, it's going to be milling us the top 5 cards of our deck, which is just a lot of cards to see go into our trash all at once at a very early stage. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Impmon. So this is the BT6 version of Impmon, and this, even though it does have some self-discard-based synergy, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing, it is just trying to help us reuse our higher-level Digimon. So he has the on-play ability where we get to discard 1 card from our hand, and if we do, we get to return 1 Digimon with 7 Great Demon Lords or 3 Musketeers in its traits, so that way it allows us to pitch what we don't want and try to grab back our higher stages to be able to reuse them over and over again. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Impmon. So this is the EX2 version of Impmon, and this is one of the better cards to not only just act as a good digging tool, but as a good mill card that we want to see go from our deck to our trash when we're going to be using our mill-based synergies and strategies. So it has the nice ability where when this card is trashed from our deck, if it wasn't trashed using this Impmon's effect, then we get to trash up to 3 cards from the top of our deck. So essentially what that means is when we're milling him, if he is a card that was milled, we get to mill even more. So imagine the situation and scenario where we're using our Impmon to be aggressive with it. We get him to be deleted, mill 5 because he's in combination with Pagumon, then Impmon was the card that was milled, and now we get to mill an extra 3 more, and that's just a lot of mill that we could see at a very early stage to be able to set up our trash as best as we possibly can for our various abilities. Then he has an on-play ability that's acting as a good digging tool, where we could reveal the top 4 cards of our deck, add 1 Digimon with Beelzemon in its name, and 1 Ai Mako from among them into our hand, then the rest go to the bottom, so it's just your stereotypical digger, and he has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Beelzemon in its name, it gets plus 3000 DP to make our Beelzemons as strong as we can possibly make them. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gazimon. So Gazimon is just an anti-meta rookie, where he's just acting as a solid floodgate for the opponent's memory manipulating shenanigans. And the same type of reasoning is why I'm also going to be running 2 copies of Psychemon as the last rookie, just because Psychemon is another anti-meta floodgate, and this time he has the altern ability, where players can't reduce their play costs, so it forces the opponent to play things a little bit more fairly, but the majority of this deck isn't necessarily affected by this card at all. Next, onto the level 4s, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Loweemon. So this is kind of a flex spot for the deck. It could really be any level 4 you want it to be, but I'm using Loweemon as that hybrid alternative win condition. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Dobermon. So this Dobermon, even though we're not necessarily playing Alice, you could play Alice if you wanted to reduce its play cost to make it easier to play. We don't really care about that. We just care about the fact that it has a nice on-delete ability where we get to trash the top 3 cards of our deck, which is already fitting on theme with what the deck is trying to do. Then we get to return a purple Digimon or purple Tamer card from our trash back to our hand, so that way even if our Tamers are milled, we have a way to be able to grab them back to be able to set them up. And then the last level 4 of the deck is going to be the most important level 4 of the deck, and that's going to be 4 copies of Wizardmon. So this is the promo version of Wizardmon, and what this card is doing is it's just interacting with wanting to be self-milled when we mill it off the top of our deck, where when this card is trashed from our deck, then we get to gain 1 memory, so it allows us to make more tempo-efficient plays if this card is milled. Then, on top of that, the inheritable ability is really what we're trying to gain out of this card to be able to line up the cards like this where they want to be self-milled. So his when attacking inheritable ability states that we can reveal 1 purple card from our hand and place it on the top of our deck, so that way we have the ability to potentially mill that card and then get its on-mill ability off. Next, onto the level 5s, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Baalmon. So you could run some other level 5s if you really wanted to, but we're not necessarily always trying to be climbing up our stages, and we're trying to rely on some various other ways to be able to get up into our level 6 and use our level 6s. So what makes Baalmon so good is the fact that if we do want to climb our stages with him, we can, but ideally we're going to be utilizing his when attacking ability as a good mill engine, just because we want to try to be aggressive to try to line up his on-delete ability, but this in combination with Wizardmon is already just a pretty powerful combination at being able to set up whatever we need to, just because his when attacking ability states that we get to trash the top 3 cards of our deck, so milling the top 3 just is a decent amount of mill, and this in combination with Wizardmon just sets up whatever card we need to mill off the top. And then on top of that, his on-delete ability states that if we have 10 or more cards in our trash, then we get to play 1 Beelzemon from our trash for free, which is just really good to be able to easily spawn a level 6 out of nowhere as an alternative way to be able to play our Beelzemons. And speaking of our Beelzemons, next onto our level 6s, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Beelzemon. So this is the BT10 Beelzemon, and this is going to be the primary Beelzemon we want to use in combination with Baalmon as the part of his on-delete ability. So he has an on-play ability himself, or when digivolving ability, so we have that flexibility on how we could use the card, where we get to trash the top 3 cards of our deck. Then for every 10 cards in our trash, we get to delete 1 of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, so he could act as a mini board wipe, but just for utilizing this card, whether he's played or digivolved. Then he himself has an actual inheritable ability for our Beelzemon Blast Mode to take advantage of, where at the end of the attack once per turn, we get to gain 1 memory for every 10 cards in our trash, so the more our trash is filled, the more memory we'll possibly be gaining out of our Beelzemon Blast Mode. And because this triggers at the end of the attack and not during the attack, it allows us to use this card in combination with Ai Mako very nicely and very easily. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Beelzemon. So this is the BT2 version of Beelzemon, and this Beelzemon is allowing us to basically skip the stages and go straight up into this card with his warp ability, just because while you have 10 or more cards in our trash, Your Impmon can digivolve into this card from our hand by paying 4 and ignoring its digivolution requirements. So we are running a decent amount of Impmons, and we do have some ways to recur our Impmons to be able to keep them on the field. So that way we're always going to have an Impmon to be able to warp digivolve into this Beelzemon, and because of all of the turbo milling that this deck can do, hitting 10 cards in our trash isn't the hardest thing in the world. Then the reward for utilizing this card is his Wind Digivolving ability, where we get to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, so again, it's just acting as some solid low-level control. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Beelzemon. So this is the EX2 version of Beelzemon, and this is the card we actually want to try to set up to self-mill more than actually digivolve and go up into. If you are going to be digivolving and going all the way up into a level 6 from your level 5, then this is the preferred and ideal card, just because he has a nice when digivolving and when attacking ability, where we get to trash the top 2 cards of our deck, then we get to delete one of the opponent's level 3 or lower Digimon, and for every 10 cards in our trash, we get to add 1 to the maximum range in which this Digimon can delete with this effect. So that's just what's making this card pretty decent to want to digivolve up into and attack with, and the reward for having him be the self-mill target is when this card is trashed from our deck, we get to play 1 Impmon from our trash for free. So ideally, we're going to be trying to use this card to set up our Impmons to be able to set up our BT2 Beelzemons when this card is milled. And then lastly, onto the level 7s, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Beelzemon Blast Mode. So Beelzemon Blast Mode is a card we want to try to set up to be milled, so that way we could try to get him into our trash for our Tamer's ability, on top of the fact that he has a pretty decent ability to use when he's actually trashed from our deck. So when this card is trashed from your deck, we get to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, so it's just a free ability that we could get off of the card to try to help set him up in our trash. And then on top of that, he has a nice Wind Digivolving ability for us to take advantage of when we're going into him, where we get to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the highest level. So if they have a field of nothing but level 3s, then he's going to delete all of the level 3s. If they have a field of nothing but level 6s, he's going to delete all of the level 6s. It's just a pretty decent, powerful removal type of ability. Then he also has a secondary ability where during your turn, for every 10 cards in our trash, this Digimon gains security attack +1, so that way he could try to deal some pretty solid damage, even though he's not necessarily an OTK-based deck. He still is going to be hitting the opponent's security pretty hard, especially since we already want to try to chip the opponent with our lower levels to try to trigger their on-delete abilities and get our setup going. And then the last level 7 of the deck is going to be 1 copy of DeathXmon. This card is 110% optional. You do not need this card in order to run the deck, and it could be anything you feel like you want it to be if you don't want to run the DeathXmon. But for the way that the meta is going to be played, just because there's a decent amount of decks that want to spam a lot of Tamers or flood the field, DeathXmon is a pretty decent card just because of how easy he is to use. So we don't necessarily need to digivolve all the way up into him if we don't want to. We could utilize the on-play part of his ability just because he has the potential to reduce his own play cost for each of the opponent's Digimon and Tamer that they have in play by 3. So if the opponent has a wide field, then we could just easily hard play this card to be able to get a level 7 out very easily. Then the reward for doing so is his on-play /Wind Digivolving ability, where we get a de-digivolve 1 on all of the opponent's Digimon, then delete all of the opponent's Digimon that's level 4 or lower. So it's not only going to shrink their board and make their board a little bit weaker, but it's going to potentially delete a lot of Digimon that they could have in play. Then at the end of the opponent's turn, once per turn, we get to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost, so that way we have some good recursive removal to try to keep the opponent's field as empty as they possibly can have it. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Mist Memory Boost. So Mist Memory Boost is going to be the deck's memory boost, and this is the deck's best memory boost just because it's actually helping us fill up our trash as quickly as it possibly can. So the main ability states that we get to trash the top 2 cards of our deck and then draw 1, and then we get to place this card into the battle area to use for its delay ability to gain 2 memory at a later turn. So just having a nice option to not only just help us self-mill, but also set up some extra memory for later and more powerful plays is what's making this card so good. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Death Stinger. So Death Stinger is another card we want to have and see when cards are getting milled, just because it has an ability where when this card is trashed from our deck, we get to gain 1 memory, making it just a pretty decent mill target, acting similar to Wizardmon. And again, Wizardmon could help set up these cards where we could just put it from our hand on the top of our deck, and then, surprise, we milled the card, triggering its on mill ability. Then the ability that we could use if we want to use this card from our hand is we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon that's level 4 or lower, and then for every 10 cards in our trash, we get to increase the level range by 1 of the Digimon that we're choosing via this card effect. So if we have 10 cards in our trash, then this is going to be able to delete a level 5. If we have 20 cards in our trash, then it's going to be able to delete a level 6, which makes this just a pretty powerful and efficient removal option, on top of a security threat, just because the security ability activates its main ability. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 1 copy of the brand new Death the Cannon. So Death the Cannon is another removal option card for us to try to take advantage of, and what this card is doing as far as the self-mill synergy is when this card is trashed from our deck, we get to return this card to our hand. So if we just accidentally blindly milled this card, then we get to add it to our hand to potentially threaten the opponent with, because now they know that we have a large body removal card that we could use at any time. Then on top of that, it has a nice main ability where we get to delete one of the opponent's level 6 or lower Digimon. And then if you have at least 10 or more cards in your trash, we get to add 1 to the maximum level that this card is going to be deleting. So as long as we have 10 or more cards, then this card could basically just hit level 7s and below, which is basically almost every single Digimon in the game outside of Digimon that don't have any levels at all. Then this is also another really good security threat where we get to activate this card's main effect. So it's just another decent card to try to help remove the opponent's cards, like Death Stinger. And then the last card and tamer of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Ai Mako. So Ai Mako is going to be our memory fixing tamer. So at the start of our turn, if we ever have less than 3 memory, they'll just always hard set us to 3. So that way we could try to make our plays as effective and efficient as we possibly can. Then they have a nice ability to help our Beelzemons become blast modes really easily, where during your turn, when your Digimon attacks, then we get to suspend this tamer to trash the top card of our deck. So not only are they just helping us fill up our trash at the same time, for any of our Digimon attacking, if the attacking Digimon is a Beelzemon, then we get to Digivolve it into a blast mode from our trash, for only digivolving it for 3, which blast mode originally cost 6, so it's greatly reduced in terms of the efficiency on us being able to utilize our blast mode. So ideally, we're going to try to have our Wizardmon set our blast mode on top of our deck, mill it, then get a Beelzemon out on the field, make sure our Beelzemon is going to be able to attack. Then we could use Ai Mako to not only just help put that into our trash, but to then, while it's in our trash, digivolve into the blast mode for a reduced cost, making just for a very powerful and very easy level 7 setup. And then there's still just a whole bunch of other cards that we could run, all depending on what you want to try to gain out of the deck and the types of tech and tools you want to use and incorporate with the deck. So just as a huge asterisk, we do not have the security promos yet. The security promos were a pretty prevalent thing in Japan, and this is one of the more important decks to utilize one of those security promos, one of them being an Impmon that helps you be able to use and reuse your level 3s. So whenever this card comes out, it's an easy and obvious inclusion into the deck. And then with that card's inclusion, it makes cards like Ginkakumon Promote run even smoother into this style of deck, just because we have various ways to be able to revive our level 3s to then be able to digivolve into a cheap and easy Promote, so that way we could use Promote as a good aggro tool because he has the rush ability. Then if you wanted to, you could round out the deck with a hybrid package. So you could use the other purple hybrid stuff and the tamer to help play and facilitate a slight self-discard based synergy. So that way we have alternative ways to be able to put the cards from our hand into our trash, to be able to use them from our trash in case we don't have the Wizardmon set up. On top of the fact that just the hybrid cards are pretty high value already, Then we do have some other pretty solid cards to run in our level 3 slots, so if you wanted to, you could run a small Gazimon package, just because we have a brand new Gazimon that could help gain us retaliation for us just having enough cards in our trash, which is something we're already trying to do anyway. With Gazimon X Antibody being a really good reward to try to help turbo mill our deck, so that way we have alternative ways to be able to self-mill us really quickly and really easily. Then, if you're going for some generic self-mill support, we do have Soulmon as a really good card to gain us memory when we're self-milling. And as a good alternative at level 5, we also could think about running Skullsatamon, just because, again, he's helping us at self-mill, and he's interacting with Demon Lords, which Beelzemon is a Demon Lord, on top of the fact that he's gaining us some memory, like Soulmon, when we self-mill, so that way we have some good memory generation to be able to make our cards a little bit more efficient. Then you do have something like Black War Growlmon as a really good generic at level 5 for the deck to run, just because the Digiburst ability can help fill up our trash, on top of the fact that it's spawning an extra body, that body probably being an Impmon, to then be able to use as fodder for sacrifice to his inheritable ability for some restand action to be able to multi-swing with our level 6s, which is pretty powerful, or be able to use that Impmon on field to be able to then warp into our level 6. So it just helps make our level 6s a little bit more usable. Then, if you really wanted to, you could also run Loweemon Chaos Mode, just because we're already trying to fill up our trash with a lot of cards, so it just makes this card a little bit easier to play, and he has a good on-play and win Digivolving ability to try to delete the opponent's Digimon or Tamers. Then, if you wanted to, we do have Jackraid that you could think about including to gain some instant memory, just because we're already trying to fill up our trash, and Jackraid is a good card to just help make more powerful plays possible, while being a decent security threat to anti-tempo the opponent. Then we do have some other really solid cards to run to try to facilitate some self-sacrificing synergy to try to delete our own Digimon. So we do have a card like Demonic Disaster that not only in security can help play our level 3s, but also can help restand our higher level Digimon, so that way we could swing with them multiple times. Then we do have Calling from the Darkness as a way to, again, try to self-delete our Digimon in case we need to trigger their on-delete abilities, while also being able to grab back 2 of our purple Digimon, which is pretty decent at reusing our cards. And then to round out our self-deleting cards, we do have some self-deleting options that are acting as removal. So Deathclaw is just the cheaper of the 2 options that we have compared to Pandemonium Flame, to just try to make sure that we could delete our Digimon and delete the opponent's Digimon at the same time. And then we do have various other memory boosts that we could think about running, all depending on what you're trying to gain out of the deck and how your deck is built and the way you're going to be using and possibly reusing your cards. And then on top of that, we do have various other purple tamers that you could think about running as well to, again, try to help round out what the deck is capable of. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation on what a Beelzemon deck is going to be like in BT10, and I think even though he's not going to be the most powerful Hyper Tier 1 meta competitive deck, he's still going to be a pretty strong and pretty fun deck to play, especially since we know that he is going to be getting support later down the line, so that way you could start by having something playable now, and be ready for when his support eventually comes. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.